Hey guys, so today I'm reading Cherie Jones's How the One Armed Sister Sweeps Her House. And this novel, which I couldn't put down by the way, um, I read it obsessively during a flight from Frankfurt to Birmingham. So obsessively just devouring this this extremely incredible debut novel by Cherie Jones. I mean, I've had this book for some time, but it was always a book that I knew it was going to sort of maybe break me. And so I just kept postponing, reading it until I just grabbed it and put it in my bag on a trip. And I didn't have any time at all to read the book. And then on my way back, I just couldn't put it down until I finished this entire novel. And I can tell you that this debut novel is a startling, deeply upsetting tale of the many ways in which women are not in fact in charge of their bodies and agency. And it's a story of multi-generational trauma. I have made sure not to write anything down at all, to just ramble through this review. And this, of course, everyone says I don't actually review the books, I talk about them, so everyone just feels that they've read it by the time I'm done. So disclaimer, spoilers, just in case you want to just dig in on your own and discover the book by yourself without having my review cloud your own understanding or engagement with the text. So this novel is powerful. It tells a story of three marriages, three women connected by a single thread of violence, of abuse, of trauma. It's deeply upsetting in so many ways, especially because there is sexual violence, there is rape, there is um, incest. Yeah. So I mean, the novel is set in Baxter's Beach, Barbados. Beautiful, beautiful paradise beach, beachfront homes. Wealthy tourists just coming in from different parts of the world and trying to just find a slice of paradise. You know the drill. This sort of place where people imagine, and daydream to go to, especially from climes where the weather is cold and you just want. When you picture a getaway, you picture Baxter's Beach, Barbados, and in this very beautiful island home, the people who actually inhabit these spaces, the people who own these spaces, underneath all the glamour and glitz of the beautiful, beautiful beachfront homes and the wealthy tourists, the actual inhabitants of this place are racked by poverty and violence and just this cutthroat um, ideals of survival uh, and so we meet the major character. The protagonist is called Lala, whose real name is Stella, or whose grandmother calls her Lala. Her grandmother Wilma is the one who tells the story from where the the title of the book comes, a story about the one-armed sister, and it's a story that we hear at the very beginning of the novel. And there's this very nice thing which I'm beginning to notice a lot in contemporary Black women's fiction. This thing about just telling stories from a points of view of different characters and just letting us meet them, for ourselves. And that's what happens here as well. Um, so Lala comes home one evening in the beginning of the novel in 1979. She's a little girl at this point, but most of the novel is set in 1984 in a very sultry summer in 1984, and most of the events that occur, the very powerful, moving events that occur in the novel, happens in 1984. But the prologue, which is the very beginning, the very first place where we meet Lala and her grandmother Wilma, I think is one of the only places we're going to meet them together at once. For a while, in this beginning in 1979, in September, Lala comes home and Wilma is waiting because she returned early from visiting cousin, who's Lala's grandfather, and her husband from the hospital. He, from the very beginning of the novel, is revealed as someone who is in a sort of vegetative state. He is battling something, old age, a disease, something that from which he is not he's not able to come out. And in this, um, he's in this very diseased, uh, very bad state where, I mean, ordinarily he'd probably need professional care, be in a care home or something. You know, it's dribbling, just he's drooling, he's sort of stinking up the place, and that kind of situation. And now he's in the hospital, and Wilma goes to visit him and come back, and so. And we learn much later that when she goes off to the hospital, Lala, who's a teenager who is just coming into her own, wanders off and just goes away, and the grandmother then uh, is shocked that Lala is coming home at 8:30 in the evening without knowing that her grandmother has returned first, and she then tells her the story of the one-armed sister, which is where the novel gets its title from. So she tells the story, and I'm going to read it out. Just bits of it. So the village vicar and his wife had two little girls, such beautiful children you never did see, skin yellow and pretty like peanut milk, hair curly and silky like peau de soie, eyes big and light brown with long lashes. So I mean, and then there's something about Cherie Jones's storytelling. It is poetic, it is moving, it does not conform to any of those stifling, stylistic and semantic rules. It just comes at you poetically, jarring in some areas, and just very deeply moving. Honestly, at some points while I was reading the novel, I'm in the middle seat, squished in between two other passengers. You know how economy is, and I'm just sitting down there and I'm reading, and at intervals, the lady at my left and the gentleman at my right they just give me that glance because I'm just trying to wipe tears from my eyes, and yeah, so it's that moving. So be ready before you read it. So and then as the story goes, in the way of some of these stories about that teach morality, myths and fables, I think. Um, so in that story, there is uh, there's a sort of hole in the middle of the garden, which is something strange to have, which can only occur in fables. And nobody's sure what that hole, this huge sort of well, is doing there. And the vicar's wife uh, has half a mind to get the yard boy to seal it off with stones and cement. It's only half a mind, and she never actually sends the boy into town to buy the bag of cement and the cement blocks to do the job. So she tells her little girls about this tunnel and how they mustn't go into it, how it has monsters that live down there, and how any little girls who go in there never come back out. So you know how it goes. And so, but in the end, I mean, one of the little girls, doesn't listen to her mother. And she goes to find out of curiosity, the type that kills a cat. She goes to find out what's going on in there, and somehow, um, well, the devil needs only a few seconds, according to the story, and so the vicar's wife is having tea with another lady, the doctor's wife, I think, and then she hears this really large scream. She rushes out and sees one of her daughters holding onto the other one, whose arm is deep in that tunnel. Something else is holding it, something devilish, something demonic, and uh, you know. And in the end, everyone just gathers around and they pull her out, but that other arm is gone, and there's nothing we can do about it now. So and while her grandmother is telling the story, Lala asks her, so none of them went back to find the arm. She wonders, not even the yard boy, which is what you would have asked, obviously, if you were being told that story. And the grandmother says the yard boy knows his limitations, and so in the end, uh, well, the good sister, um, it ends well for her. The second sister, the bad sister, is the one who ends up without an arm, and and so in the end, Lala says, "Well, I bet it's not so bad having one arm. She can still do things like everybody else. She can still get a husband and some children and a house." And her grandmother says, "Stupid girl. how's she gonna sweep it? So that's the story of how the one armed sister sweeps her house. And from that point, we then move on to 1984, where everything else happens. Now, Lala is pregnant and she's around 18. She's married to Aiden, a really bad professional thief. And because of this marriage, obviously, her grandmother doesn't want anything to do with her. And when we first meet her in this her new state, she's pregnant, and her labor obviously started early, and she's finding it's difficult to move. She's bleeding, and she has to find her way to Baxter General, which is the only hospital understaffed, around the area. So she's trying to find help. So she's moving. In the first, one of these big mansions, the lake, the beachfront homes. She rings a buzzer at one of them, and somehow it is Aiden, her husband, who has disappeared in the middle of the night for a job, who then comes out through the gate, and he has a gun. She heard a gunshot on a scream, and obviously the reader begins to understand that something has gone wrong. And so we then realize, as he takes her to the hospital, that he's just committed a murder, and the and the significant thing about this is that Lala is about to become a mother, and she's witnessed a murder. So, not witnesses, she knows it's happened, but she goes on to the hospital. Um, she has this child who, at some point, we think has died, and then finally resuscitate the baby. The baby finally goes home. Aiden is in hiding because, according to him, the lady of the house recognized him because she pulled off the sock that he covered his face with. And all these other parts of the story begin to come together when we realize that Aiden has gone into hiding, and now he needs Lala to protect him, and in case anybody finds out. So, and then from that we move on to the story of Mrs. Wallen, who is this other woman whose husband has just died. She's married this rich white man who came from England to his beach house, and now he's dead, and her life has changed once more, and she's struggling, and then we just keep doing this back and forth thing where we begin to learn about the different characters and the very horrible situation to be in, and then we find out about this other woman, Wilma herself, because at some point during the struggle, when Aiden comes home at some point, he's struggling with Lala to hold the baby, and the baby falls, and uh, you know, and they wonder, should we take him to the hospital? Should we take her to the hospital? Should we not? And in the end, um, the baby dies, and when he dies, they don't know what to do, and so Tone, who is um, Aiden's sort of business partner and someone uh, who Lala met as a teenage girl, and they had a brief thing before he was shipped up to prison, comes up with this idea of trying to make it look like the baby's been kidnapped, so they can come out and say, "Oh, we found him and he's dead. We found her." I don't know how I keep calling that baby a he. So I mean, there's a lot of violence, domestic violence going on in that home. Lala's been desperately abused by Aiden. And it's really, really terrible, and she can't do anything about it. And there isn't anything that she hasn't tried, based on what her grandmother's told her. She's wondering, what it would have been like to have a mother. And now we get to the point where during the time when the baby dies, the grandmother finally comes, who refused to come when she had the baby. And when the police is questioning her about, what she knows about what's going on, she then tells her own story. And according to her own rationalization, of course, which is a trauma response, she talks about the fact that the women in her lineage are, always sort of awaken the devil in men and something like that. All the abuse that her daughter faced. Her daughter Esme, who is Lala's mother, was raped by her father cousin, and because of that, instead of Wilma to then take her child and leave that situation, she begins to lock her in an outhouse instead to sleep, away from where cousin will get a hold of her. I mean, there's just a lot of, transgenerational trauma going on in this, in this novel. These women are grappling with the worst kind of abuse and the worst kind of pain and the worst kind of violence, and there's all this ugliness and darkness, all around the place. And they continue to look for the person who's murdered this English gentleman, and a lot of stories begin to unfold, even about his wife, Mrs. Mark Wallen, who who's the daughter of another woman who's uh, um, this sort of and it opens up the questions of intersectionality, because Mrs. Wallen's mother is white, but she's sort of white in Baxter Island that is worse than even black, and somehow she has this child for this very successful black man, and I mean, it's just all kinds of terrible things just going on. But in the end, um, Lala continues to try to escape from her situation because now is really bad. Aiden's trying to kill her, and he's saying that he has to go back and finish off Mrs. Wallen because she actually saw his face during the robbery. Mrs. Wallen is confused. She doesn't know. She goes to the police and they show her these images of these men, and she cannot say for sure that this is the person that came to her home to kill her husband. And in the end, Tone goes back to prison for killing Aiden. They get into this fight because he's now fed up of what he's doing to Lala, who he's in love with, and So get the book, read it, and share your thoughts about this very very interesting and haunting book, which I just feel that everybody should read because it just opens our eyes to one of the very um, deeply pathetic situations in the world. And honestly, there isn't any sort of review that can do this book justice until you actually read it and start to engage with the story and the depth of violence and abuse and transgenerational trauma that Cherie Jones has um, has tried to show us within the pages of this book. And this is a wonderful, wonderful debut novel, and just gets me so excited about what's next from this fantastic author. So thank you for watching. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, leave your comments, and let's talk about this book. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.